In his capacity as chair of the Southern African Development Community Organ on Politics, Defence and Security, President Ramaphosa concluded a one-day working visit to Eswatini with His Majesty King Mswati III several days ago. The deliberations resolved that the Kingdom of Eswatini will embark on a process that will work toward the establishment of a national dialogue forum. To respond to this, we're joined by Mlungisi Makhanya, President of the People's United Democratic Movement in Eswatini, which has been at the forefront of calling for democratic reforms. Mlungisi, good morning and thank you for speaking to us. What progress, if any, has been made since President Ramaphosa left Eswatini a few days ago? Mlungisi, if you can hear me, you appear to be muted. Please unmute your mic.
Good morning, Hugo, and good morning to Newzroom Afrika viewers. And thank you for the opportunity for us to set the record straight. We woke up today to a very disturbing distortion by one of the Mswati propaganda newspapers that alleges that we have said no to dialogue as proposed by President Ramaphosa. That is a complete distortion. All that we are saying and what we have said is that first and foremost, we welcome the intervention by the SADC chair on organ on Troika, President Ramaphosa, who, since assuming that position, he has demonstrated the necessary urgency in attending to the issue of Swaziland. We have said we are committed to dialogue, but the dialogue that we are committed to is a dialogue that will be all-inclusive, is a dialogue whose terms of reference shall be germinated by the people of Swaziland, working together with SADC Secretariat and maybe the government, not to the exclusion of the people and civil society. It is precisely for this reason that we have made an indication to President Ramaphosa and the SADC Secretariat that we will be submitting this week our own proposed terms of reference that should guide any process towards any meaningful dialogue in Swaziland.
Now, King Mswati III has suggested or proposed a Sibaya during the course of, in the next few months. Now, based on some communication that we received, this national dialogue, if you were, is very much a monologue and not a dialogue. How do you respond to this?
Well, what Mswati has in his mind is definitely not a dialogue, but a monologue. But what we have in mind and what we believe the chairperson has in mind is a dialogue. But before we can even engage in any meaningful dialogue, we have already made our demands very clear. Amongst those demands is that we want an immediate release of the incarcerated members of parliament, including the jailed internationalist comrade Amos Mbedze, that we want him released and released immediately and sent back to his home country. We have made it clear that we want unconditional return of our leaders who are in exile, some of them who have been in exile for over 20 years now, including the recently exiled member of parliament, Mduduzi Smelane. We have also made it clear that we want the army to go back to the barracks and we want cessation of all violence that is currently unleashed on the Swazi people. What Mswati is talking about when he talks about Sibaya is something that we are not interested in. Sibaya is not a forum of any meaningful dialogue, and it has never been a dialogue in place in the history of the Swazi nation. What we want to make it perfectly clear here to the chairperson, President Ramaphosa and SADC, is that no amount of exorcism on the already discredited regime of Mswati that is guilty for killing so many people will work this time around. All that will work is an honest, all-inclusive dialogue that will take place after the release of the members of parliament and the return of all exiles. It is for these reasons that we will be announcing very soon an ultimatum date on which we expect these things to have been done, failing which we are going to embark on a matter of all protests to make sure that we force this regime to concede to these demands.
Mlungisi, I get the impression that there isn't some form of interface, certainly between you and SADC, or there isn't a present mediator who's listening to you and listening to what the government of King Mswati actually has to say. Is this a correct perception?
Well, it is partly correct, but what we want to make it clear is that indeed the office of the president, in his capacity as the chairperson of Troika, has made it clear that we are more than welcome to make submission in terms of the terms of reference that we would like to see on this dialogue. But also they've given clarity to say this dialogue is not going to wait for the family ritual of Mswati called Ingwala, nor is it really going to be taking place under Sibaya. And I think for us that was quite a welcome relief, but we are not in any way interested in taking our foot off the pedal. What we are focusing on is an intensification of the struggle and an acceleration of pressure on the regime, because we are clear that whatever will happen in Swaziland, it will be largely as a result of the contribution that we made as Swazis. Not necessarily much in the boardrooms of the dialogue, but most importantly on the ground where the battle is being fought.
Is this therefore not against the spirit of dialogue that SADC Troika is speaking to?
It is definitely not against the spirit of dialogue. If anything at all, it is meant to enhance dialogue. Because remember, as President Ramaphosa and SADC is speaking about dialogue, Mswati's police and soldiers continue to brutalize our people in our communities. Our people continue to live in fear. Schools continue to be closed. The curfew, a very unreasonable curfew times, continue to be imposed on us. So we believe that if anything that would enhance any spirit of dialogue should be the release of the incarcerated MPs, should be the return of exiles, should be the return of the soldiers to barrack. It should be the end of violence that is unleashed on our people. We cannot say when the people are pushing back against brutalization that it is offensive to the spirit of dialogue. What is currently obtaining and done by government, which is the exclusive use of violence, is what is actually not in the spirit of dialogue.
Now, you represent, obviously, you are the president of the People's United Democratic Front in Eswatini. How big is your front? Who do you represent? Do you represent any other organizations apart from yours?
Well, I represent the People's United Democratic Movement, which is by far the largest political party in Swaziland. But this political party is also a member of the Political Party Assembly, which is an assembly of political parties in Swaziland. But also we have the Multi-Stakeholder Forum, which is the broadest forum of all pro-democracy movement, including civil society, faith-based organizations, student formations, and so on and so forth. And we are all in one on our 5 key demands on what needs to happen in terms of the dialogue. So while one is the president of Pudemo, but the views that we are articulating are views that are shared by broader society in our country.
So as you speak now, you speak on behalf of the Multi-Stakeholder Forum and as far as the demands that you are making on King Mswati's government.
No, I'm speaking in my capacity as the president of Pudemo, but what I'm saying is that Pudemo's articulations and positions are consistent and in sync with those of the Multi-Stakeholder Forum and other broader formations in Swaziland. So it doesn't matter much who you're speaking to. What matters most is what are the core demands that we have taken to SADC and that we are saying ought to happen for any meaning dialogue to unfold in our country.
Now you speak of an impending mother of all mass protests in the next few weeks, I'd imagine, from what you've said, if King Mswati does not react. What are the timelines to this?
Well, few weeks was rather too long. Look, we can't survive a day longer under the misery of Mswati's Ingundla regime. We are going to give this regime, and we are giving this regime up until the end of this commencing week, to have released the members of parliament, to have allowed those who are outside the country, our leaders, to come back so that they can meaningfully participate in any processes that are aimed at resolving the long-standing political dispute in our country. So we're not necessarily looking at weeks. We're going to be announcing this in the coming days, because our people cannot wait a day longer under the traumatic regime of Mswati. Our people are tired of being kitchen girls, garden boys, and tea servers at the palaces of a regime that its own interest is about the royal family and nobody else. If you can see the sort of lavish lifestyle that is led by the king and his family at the face and in the sea of absolute dire poverty of the Swazi nation, you would understand exactly our impatience on this matter.
Final question, Mlungisi, before we let you go. It is reported that somewhere in the region of 80 people have lost their lives in the unrest that's occurred in the last few months. Do you not feel that you're sacrificing more lives if you go ahead with this mass protest? Or do you feel that casualties of war, so to speak, are part and parcel of searching for this freedom, if you will?
We are definitely not sacrificing any lives. We are not responsible for the massacre of over 80 Swazis. It is Mswati and his security forces who have killed those Swazis. If anything at all, we are indebted to those martyrs of our struggle who paid the supreme sacrifice for us to move forward as a country. Anything else would constitute nothing but a betrayal to those who have laid down their lives. All that we are doing in honor of those who have laid down their lives, but also in defense of the future generation and our kids, it's to make sure that if we need to be the firewall, that will make sure that our children do not live under a regime that does not care about the ordinary lives of Swazis, but care about the flamboyant lifestyle of the king, who are more than willing to do so. We are talking about a country here that nurses were on the street the entire week, this last week, complaining about lack of medicine in hospitals. This government for days has been unable to provide food for admitted patients in hospitals. So Mswati has not killed people through the bullets only. He continues to kill our people by ensuring that there is no adequate medical healthcare in healthcare facilities, by ensuring that there is no food for admitted patients in hospitals. So it's not us who are killing our people. It is this regime that is killing our people, and that is what we want to bring to an absolute end.
Mlungisi Makhanya, thank you so much for your time. He's the president of the People's United Democratic Movement in Eswatini, and walking us through the timelines to that mother of all mass protests, he calls it, in the next few days, he says. Well, up next